What I'm going to be talking about is the idea of building instructional tools with generative AI APIs. I had a client come to me basically saying, we're getting pitches all over the place from people, either existing vendors or prospective vendors, who are incorporating AI into all their tools and showing all of our people all these great capabilities. But nobody's really coming in and doing a balanced presentation. Nobody's talking about both the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats. And so I put together a presentation for them that is the preceding presentation, which is now up in LinkedIn. I sort of chopped it up and wrote it up as an article that has more in-depth information. Real quick background on me. This is actually not me. This is a picture of me that I took and transformed into Ernest Hemingway. But it is my background. It is my shirt. It is essentially me. This just took just a couple minutes just to underscore the point that you can't trust anything you see nowadays, because it's so easy to use these generative AI tools to manipulate existing media. It's ridiculous. My background, my undergrad was in psychology, minor in business management, and also I'm a graduate of the program. So all my degrees are from Bloomsburg. Co-founder, lead developer of Test Track Learning Management System, and also do consulting and full stack development and things on the side, as well as instructional design for some of my clients. Some of the clients that use the LMS need help in that respect. So I do consulting, full stack development. I also developed an AI engine for games. It plays a whole variety of different games pretty well, which is pretty neat, which is actually a different technology than generative AI that we're going to be talking about. It's more reinforcement learning AI for any of the AI nerds out there who sort of follow that. Published author, adjunct professor, all that fun stuff. The objectives of what we're going to talk about is what I want you to walk away with from this presentation is the ability to recognize some issues with generative AI in the workplace, identify generative AI location on the crossing the chasm model, which you may or may not be familiar with, but I'll go over really quickly. Convert in the instructional design process into steps suitable for a graphical user interface. That may be a little vague, but we'll sort of hit that when we come around to it. And I'll show you how I approached that, how I took the instructional design process, broke it down, and wove it together with generative AI steps in order to create a tool that you're also going to get to use. At the end of the presentation, I'll give you a link to it, and you're free to run it around the block and see what you think. And state the future instructional design impacts from generative AI. So I want to talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. So issues at work with generative AI, and if you use the tools that I'll point you to later, you'll become familiar with these little guys. These are sort of the mascots. These little Chrome robots typing in typewriters are what shows up on the screen when the system is talking with OpenAI and generating content. So you'll become familiar with those guys. So unresolved legal and social issues, there are a lot of them. Copyright, the inability to copyright directly things that have been generated with generative AI. It's a problem. Ownership of what you generate with AI is potentially a problem. There are a lot of things in flux related to regulations and lawsuits. Really a big one to keep an eye on is the Getty Images lawsuit, which kicks off in the United States and the UK at the end of the year. If you follow along the news, that is definitely something, because that may change, that may redefine what derivative works means in copyright law, which will have a huge impact on these tools, how they're used, and how they're going to be regulated. And also job displacement, which is something that's been touched on in the other presentations. The idea that if you're I don't think it's going to directly displace jobs as much as it's going to change the nature of work. A group of 5 might be able to do the same thing with a group of 2 plus some of these tools. Or a job that breaks up into 5 or 6 tasks. One of those tasks might end up being handed off to AI. That's really what I think we're going to see more of than somebody just being completely displaced. But there is a book by a guy named Alvin Toffler called Future Shock, which is all about the idea of what happens when technology changes so fast it starts displacing people. Anyway, he wrote the book in 1970 and talked about everybody ending up in the gig economy. So there's some interesting things there. One of the things about this, and whether the future of AI is not yet written, but one thing to know about it is that it's fast, cheap, and easy to use, which is a formula for disruptive technology. Typically, any one of those alone, and an audience that cares about that is going to create disruption. In this case, all three of those are checked. I have a hard time seeing how it won't. But most people, most professionals I talk to dislike the technology, somewhere between dislike and absolute hate. And so when you talk about people, not necessarily technical people, but people in a variety of different jobs like writers, illustrators, all sorts of creative musicians, all sorts of creative ventures. The more experience people have in their domain, the less they like the AI tools changing what their job is. A minority of people are excited about this idea, and the question is, how does this make sense? How can some people say that this is so transformative, and then a vast majority of people say, I'm not really fond of it? And the answer, I think, kind of lies in the Crossing the Chasm, which is a model of technical adoption. So basically, it says when new technologies come around, how they get adopted is not by everybody first. It sort of rolls out in layers. And the first layer is innovators, techies. That's me. I am somebody who I like to know how things work. I don't mind putting time, effort, resources into figuring it out. And it's perfectly fine by me if I use a technology, I figure it all out, I might build a whole bunch of code around it, and then don't use it. Put it in my back pocket, and maybe I'll take it out and use it for solve the problem with it later. Maybe not. That's fine with me. The next group is early adopters, people who say, well, there's potential here. Maybe there's something good. I don't know. I'm gonna remain a skeptic, but I'm gonna put a little time and energy into figuring out whether I can find value here. Those are the early adopters. So that's Carl. And people like Carl who are like, yeah, I'm gonna kick it around and see what happens. And I might prove that there's benefit and value, or maybe not. But while that's all working itself out, you find yourselves in the chasm, which is sort of where we are. Early majority are the pragmatists. They're the people that say, okay, once the early adopters have figured out where the value is, then I'm going to change my process to incorporate this technology. But I'm not going to do it before that, because this is sort of a promise of savings. This is a promise of productivity, but it hasn't yet been proven yet. So once you do that, that's when the pragmatists come on board. And if you don't do that, that's where the technology goes back up on the shelf and doesn't get used. And then the more conservative late majority are people who say, you know what, I'm not going to waste my time with this. When this becomes policy, I will use it. And then the day it becomes policy, they use it. But before that, they're going to let other people figure out whether it's going to help them or not. And then laggards, you're going to end up with some people who are just not going to use the technology because they like to do it. They like the way that they do it. So right now, it feels like there's a lot of laggards as early adopters, the visionaries, prove and document the value. I think we will see people form into early majority and late majority. And those are some concepts that sort of been touched on in some other presentations. So if you look at the instructional design process and sort of break it down, it's a bunch of steps. And a thank you to Sean Foley for me not mentioning Dick and Carey, being the first to mention Dick and Carey. Dick and Carey model is how I think about instructional design more than Addy. But whatever the real process is that you use for instructional design, the real steps for building your courses and getting them out, from analysis all the way to delivery, it's probably a series of multiple steps, 5, 6 steps. If you look at that abstractly, you are really breaking down, each step breaks down really into the same four things. You're collecting specific information related to that step. You're synthesizing information, which might be writing objectives, doing an audience analysis, writing the actual materials, knowledge, doing a knowledge assessment, those types of things. But each of those steps in the process, you're collecting, synthesizing, validating that this is correct, either by sitting with the SME or putting it in front of users, and then updating information, right? So we did that, we got feedback, now let's go update our information and then move on to the next step. This actually aligns really well with what researchers, deep AI type researchers are writing a lot of papers about, which is that asking ChatGPT to do something in a one-shot mode, like, write me a paper on topic X, is okay. It can do that, but the quality is usually not as good as if you break it up into steps, and that's called a chain of thought or tree of thought, depending on whether you're going step, 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 or whether you're going step, branch, and then stepping on all those branches, and then stepping all those successive branches. I mention that because that research lines up with this idea of breaking down the instructional design process. Now, synthesis in each of these steps is really where generative AI shines, right? Draft number one, the first version of each of these things is really what GPT is good at doing. However, chat is not a great interface. It's not a great graphical user interface for this type of work. And you've seen that in some of the other presentations. So it brings up the question of how do you build a tool that is a better way to interface with ChatGPT to solve a particular business problem and integrate each of the steps. And so I've been working on a framework to do this, and I'm trying to tackle some different business problems, partly for experience and partly to see where this is all going. So what I did here was I built a micro-learning builder prototype. And so the idea is this is going to build you a small course, 5-screen course, 5-question assessment, single objective, and output it for you automatically. So you'll be able to use this when you get the link. This is screen caps just to keep me from bouncing back and forth between all the applications. So in this tool, all you do is start with your informal goal. So here, I decided I want a course that'll teach an animal trainer to teach circus raccoons to play a toy piano to entertain a crowd. That's basically what I want to do. Now, the system basically takes that information, sends it off to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT comes back with a bunch of options. Because what we're going to do is, that's my informal goal. I want to create something more formal. We're good instructional designers. So let's break this up into audience behavior, conditions, and degree of mastery, because it's the right thing to do. And also it makes your instruction better, because honing this at this step makes each of the successive steps better. And in this case, the interface just comes back to each of the 4 parts, asks you which options you want to use. The less defined the part, the more options it's going to come up with. It removes duplicates for the most part, unless, like in this case, it didn't find one that duplicates because there's a period at the end of the sentence in one version. But in general, it'll scrub it for duplicates, present you the options. You pick what you want. You can type in another option, and then it'll give you the it concatenates it all together to become a formal objective. Next tab, which becomes enabled, is the course name. What do you know? Normally, when you build a course, you start actually by naming it. In this case, it actually says, well, let's do the objective first, and then ChatGPT comes up with course names. In this case, came up with 4 unique course names. I can type in my own if I want, and then go on to the next screen. Here, I can edit it. If I picked one of the canned responses, and here I can also put in information. So this is any other additional course information you want GPT to use in building your instruction, but not necessarily give the users. So this could be the outline version of the steps to a process. It might be passive voice, it might be very dry, and very direct. So it might be very dense information you paste in here, but ChatGPT is going to make it less dense as we build the rest of the course. So the next step, it's going to say, okay, well, this course is going to be 5 steps. What are the screen titles going to be? Because that's right, ties in directly with how you're going to teach the objective. Comes up with a couple different options, presents them to you. You can click whichever one you want as a starting point. Then it gives you the ability to edit it. So you can edit all the screen titles, and then it gets into building the course. And so it builds each screen one at a time, comes up with several different options for each screen, and it knows all the information that you've entered up to this point. So if there was any additional information, you pasted in there. If you give it a process, it's going to use that process. If you give it specific steps or terminology, it's going to use those steps or terminology as it builds out the screens. It also knows what all the screen titles are, so it can actually say on the next screen you'll learn about X at the end. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not, but it'll add those in, and it also has the content from the prior screen when it's building screen, so that it can directly reference things it just told you about. So this is all using the API. You can absolutely get all this information just using ChatGPT, but it would require a lot of copying and pasting, things along those lines. So here, I've selected which option I want. There's a WYSIWYG editor, so I can edit it. Actually, there's a text editor. There's not a WYSIWYG editor in here. I could drop a WYSIWYG editor in here if I wanted to. There's a whole bunch of things that I could do, but for the prototype, I've been trying to focus on keeping it very, very narrow, because this is not incorporated with any other learning management system. It actually is on the TTLMS server, but it's sandboxed. It's not actually part of the LMS. It's completely separate from that. It's just a convenient place to share it from. So after you build each of the 5 screens, it'll build an assessment for you based on the information that you approved, selected, and edited in those 5 screens. Comes up with 5 questions. Any of the information on any of the tabs I showed you, if you want to regenerate it, you click the regenerate button at the very bottom and it'll regenerate it. So if you don't like this version of the test, regenerate, it'll give you a different version of the test. Or if you end up editing a whole bunch of information that makes your test out of date, you edit the information in the course, come back to the test, click regenerate, it regenerates the whole thing for you. Sort of as you would expect. And then it opens up the ability, once you've completed all the tabs, it opens up the ability to run it. Click export. Once you click export, the launch button's available. You click launch, it opens up an HTML page that has all the content information in it and an interactive, so it looks kind of like this, where all the information is sort of stacked. So it's one big scrollable field, which is not exactly how you might want your course to be built. But for the prototype, it works pretty well. And also a knowledge check at the bottom. So the knowledge check, so it's all that information we entered, either selected, entered, or approved. And you can, check what's, basically you can walk through, answer these, and do a little self-assessment as you want. There's no SCORM interactivity or XAPI activity. Just because I didn't build it, it didn't seem necessary for the prototype. Those are things that I've done and certainly could change this to export or incorporate either of those technologies. That's pretty easy to do. So let me talk a little bit about tips and tricks for generative AI APIs. So if you end up tinkering with this, these are recommendations. One is to use a focus as much as you can on the low-level HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and avoid frameworks, libraries. Don't try to bolt this onto a product on day one. Try to figure out how the APIs work. There are different. Even if you have experience programming and you've worked with other different types of APIs, they are a different animal. They don't work like the normal create, update, delete interfaces that most APIs work around, where you're really using an API as a substitute for a database and you're pushing and pulling information in and out. These are different animals. Use examples. ChatGPT loves examples. Analogies, that works too. If you're asking it for code or very technical responses, giving it an example response and saying, this is what I want in this order is a really good idea. It loves that. Specify a style guide for formatting. Doesn't matter what style guide, it's read them all. So AP, APA, Chicago style, all the demos that I use GPO, which is Government Printing Office style guide. And I just tell it in invisible language that goes to the API, use this style guide. And what that does is it solves formatting issues consistently. Your bullets will start showing up consistently. If you don't specify a style guide, those things from screen to screen might be a little bit different each time you go in and generate. You can ask for JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, and scrub the response. So if you ask it to return you a JSON object, it will do that 80% of the time. But the other times it'll say, sure, I created a JSON object containing the information you asked for, and here it is. And of course, if you in your code try to turn that back into the structure, it'll get all confused and it'll throw errors because it doesn't like that leading sentence or an ending sentence. So when you ask for JSON, it's usually a good idea to scrub the response just to make sure that you're actually getting back the JSON array or structure that you're looking for. Use try and catch in your language. You can actually do a lot with the API without using any application server language. I use Cold Fusion on the back end because I love Cold Fusion. I've been using it since version 4.5. I've been using it since literally, I think they taught it in the program and then stopped teaching in the program. I've been using it since before any of that. Try catch is really important because the API fails, and it will fail in unexpected ways at unexpected times. There's at least 3 different ways that I've learned that it fails, and you need to protect your users against those rather than seeing error messages. You want them to have a better experience. Salt the conversation. Because of the way that ChatGPT works, you can have conversations. So regarding objectives, right? Like whether or not ChatGPT knows how to write a 4-part objective depends on what day of the week it is. What it really means is which random seed it's using at that time, but that's kind of invisible to you. But if you say in the conversation, you can say in the structure that you send to it, you can actually fake part of the conversation. You can say, hey, ChatGPT, what is a 4-part objective? And then just give it the correct answer. Give it the model answer that you wanted it to have given you. And any questions from that point forward will be answered in the context of it knowing what a 4-part objective is based on your response. So you can put that stuff in there to help it guide a response back to you that even the user doesn't end up seeing because there's a user interface on top of this. Ask for choices, which is a feature of the ChatGPT API. That rather than asking it a question and getting a response, you can in the interface, you can say, well, regenerate that response. Like I didn't like it, click a button, you can have it regenerate it. In the API, you can say, give me 3 choices, give me 5 choices. And it actually regenerates a new answer for each of those choices and then structures it in a way that you can pick it apart through the API. So when I asked it to generate I asked it to generate 5 questions for screens related to the subjective, but I said, do that 3 times. And then that's what I present the user for them to pick from to sort of to jumpstart that tab. And you can mix ChatGPT 3.5 and also ChatGPT 4. So ChatGPT 4 is generally considered more accurate, but it's also more expensive. So you can actually mix the two, and you can say, all right, I'm going to let GPT-4 do the heavy lifting to write the complicated passages, but I'm going to use ChatGPT-3 to like pick out the unique items. Here's a paragraph, and I want all the objects mentioned or all the primary things mentioned in this paragraph. GPT-3 is perfectly fine for that. And it doesn't matter. The code is the same except for a flag. So it's really easy to just use the cheap one where it's good enough, and use the expensive one where you need a more thoughtful answer. And the users don't need to see that. Now, let me talk for a second about impacts to instructional design from generative AI. Angry Owl is not happy that the job may change, and the job of instructional design. But here's what I see happening in the future. Innovators and early adopters are going to continue experimenting and continue prototyping. Existing products are going to continue bolting on AI to their products to see where they can add value. Fine-tuned models are going to become a thing. A fine-tuned model is an instance of ChatGPT that you can load up with your own documents, your own information. So imagine a world where you have a complete archive of all of your courses, because you should, in instructional design format, right? The design documents, or you could actually use HTML files. It'll accept that too. But let's say you have a great archive of all of your instructional design documents that's accurate, up to date. You can load that into ChatGPT. You can load in all of your standard operating procedures into ChatGPT and create what's called a fine-tuned model. The fine-tuned model will start to talk about your SOPs and answer questions about it accurately, and it'll use the voice and formatting style from your design documents. So this essentially becomes your subject matter expert for your SOPs, if everything you have is basically up to date. I think fine-tuned models are going to be a competitive advantage between consulting companies for a little while, and then you're going to start to see organizations create their own. They're going to get to the point where they'll have the data pools that they need in order to create their own version of fine-tuned models. And then, okay, as an instructional designer, this is where you go to ask more detailed questions. Potentially that becomes a chatbot, right? There may be use cases where we don't even need a course on this. We need a chatbot tuned to the specific information, and then we just need to give our internal people the ability to query it as they want. So I think there's an open question of like, what is a course in the future? Like, what is a resource center? Like, if we have a resource center because we want people to be able to identify competencies they need to work on in order to get to that next job. And then here are all the resources related to that. What it looks like in the future it does not have to be what it looked like in the past. Just-in-time learning, micro-learning, chatbots, learning management systems, LRSs, they all might be different in the future as these technologies evolve. And this last point is the point I kind of wanted to end the presentation on. I understand there's pushback, and there should be. I mean, there should be a critical analysis of what this generative AI is doing to our organizations and our jobs, our society, copyright. We need to be aware of these issues as they all play out, because a lot of these things are not yet written, and so I wanted to say, let us exceed our expectations of our clients, before somebody else does, which means that maybe we're spending less time writing. Draft number 1 of anything is gone. GPT is going to be doing that, but that doesn't mean GPT needs to start with an informal goal. It could be working from a more detailed, intricately done analysis, write the first draft, and then you as an instructional designer are working with the subject matter expert to really fine tune it and make sure that it does what it does, which means it's even more important to use instructional strategies and to say, like, can we gamify this? What's the right tool to solve this training problem? There's a lot more options that are going to be available to all of us, and it's really important that rather than say, okay, what we do is now less expensive because it takes less time. That's kind of true, and there's not going to be a lot of arguing about that if all you want is low-hanging fruit. What we should be saying is, what else do we want to do with this capacity we now have? Do we want to design better? Do we want to work with clients better? Do we want to do higher level things to teach people? Do we want to spend more time piloting, so we actually like put this in front of users, get their feedback, and edit it and update it before we roll this out? You use that time and energy strategically rather than just giving it up. And I wanted to end on that bullet point. But this week happened. And to give you an idea of what happened this week, XAI, which is Elon Musk's company, launched a new LLM, which is a text-based generative AI called Grok with an IDE. The IDE understands tree of thought and train of thought and tree of thought. So I've only seen screen caps, but it's pretty exciting that there may be a hybrid here, that a better way of working with GPT or other LLMs than chat without having to build a custom interface. OpenAI announced new tools for fine tunings. In fact, even a service that they'll do it all for you. And they basically said it's going to be really expensive to start with, but we'll send in our consultants. We'll take all of your documents, we'll organize it, create a fine tuning, and it'll be all yours, and you can use it however you want. And the tools for document queries as well, which is kind of interesting. The idea, like, okay, I'm going to take this SOP and upload it as a PDF to GPT, let it digest it, and now I'm going to start asking it questions. Rather than reading the whole thing, right? So it could be SOPs usually are shorter, but like guidance documents, regulations, all those kinds of things that you could say, this is new information you haven't yet digested, going to give it to you, and then I'm going to start querying you on it. OpenAI also launched a new store for no-code or low-code GPT apps, and also assistants, which is a separate feature that they announced. So you can have fine-tuned assistants that answer you in particular ways, and search for different types of information. And all the apps you saw today could be rebuilt on ChatGPT's new platform, right? And there would be advantages to that and disadvantages to that. But what they envision is something like YouTube, where like if you build a really useful app, anybody who has ChatGPT or anyone who has an OpenAI login can go to your app on OpenAI's website, use it, and then whoever developed it gets a revenue share. So it's a YouTube-like model. They also fixed the JSON issue. So you can pass it a flag now and say, make sure the response is JSON, and it'll always return JSON. Like that is awesome. That saves a lot of headaches. It really does. Like I so look forward to that. They've also updated the database so that it's not frozen in time in September 2021. It's jumped forward almost 2 years to April 2023. So the new version of GPT-4 Turbo is going to actually know about things. So it's not going to tell me Elon Musk has nothing to do with Twitter, which I had this hilarious conversation back and forth because it just insisted, yeah, Elon Musk has nothing to do with Twitter. He doesn't own it. He doesn't anything. Anyway, at least its knowledge will be up to date. And that new version is also going to be able to generate, and this is amazing, 300 pages in one shot. It can write an entire book in one shot, which is amazing. Now, you still may have problems with that, and you still may find that a broken up approach, like the chain of thought, tree of thought, is a better way to go. And the API also now uses vision, which is it can input an image and tell you what's going on in that image. It can generate images now. And it can do text to speech, so it can return the response as, I believe it's an MP3 that contains a speech version of what it otherwise would have said. So with that, I'll ask if there are any questions. If you want to try the prototypes, the information I'm about to drop into the chat, there's 3. There's learning micro learning builder, which I just sort of step you through. There's a SWOT analysis, which takes any concept that you want to break down, and it will workshop with you through strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and then generate a conclusion based on the information that you workshopped with it. And on the third prototype is what I call Colbot. So Colbot will take a news article that you paste in, and it will workshop jokes and punchlines with you, and then it'll generate an entire monologue similar to Stephen Colbert, sort of based on his writing style and also the writing style of some other late night hosts. One of the things I'm tinkering with now is a virtual escape room, something that could take the information in the micro learning builder and then build a virtual escape room out of it. So take like a metaphor of, like we're stuck in, we're archaeologists stuck in a pyramid trying to get out, and questions related to the content, and work those two things together to create an online interaction game based on that content. If you need your own version, of these tools, if you say, hey, there's another business process that's very similar, I'd be happy to make you one. I'd be happy to talk about what it'll take and how we can deploy it. As soon as the GPTs get rolled out, which they just announced the Monday, so it's going to take a little bit of time before that's available. I'm going to start kicking the tires of that system as well, and see what things we do could be done directly on the platform without having to layer on another external server. Yeah, so I'll turn it back to Carl. I don't know if we have time for questions. I haven't been following the chat because it's hard to sort of watch that while.
So Jay, there is a quick question. Lima asked about an example of using generative AI to develop a microlearning course. Can the technology also generate disability compliance sections like 501, 505, for example? And does it develop like SCORM and that kind of stuff?
So actually, it would be possible to automate, sure, in a variety of ways with disability. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting that is an interesting question, and it absolutely could, especially some of the new capabilities of here's an image. If you upload a process as a graphic, it can actually read it, break apart the process. There's a really neat demo I saw where it actually takes a diagram of a brain. And so it's like a brain, and it's extruded, and it's like, okay, this works with this, and this does this, and it was a very complicated graphic, and it explained it legibly in text. So I could see this and this actually making those types of activities a lot easier.